My ex lied about being pregnant, while I supported her, so I sold our shared home and vanished, leaving her begging for a single chance back. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and for most of my life, I believed love meant stepping up whenever the person you cared about needed you. Jenna came into my life like a whirlwind, funny, charming, and the kind of person who made you laugh even on your worst days. She always had that smile that made people forgive her for almost anything, and I guess that's why I fell so hard. The thing was, Jenna never had much money. She bounced from job to job, always finding her path, and I was the one who quietly paid for rent, groceries, utilities, hell, even the occasional car repair or medical bill. Every time she stressed about money, I'd say, "It's okay, we'll figure it out," and meant it. I thought that's what love was: patience, understanding, and showing up no matter what. Her friends would laugh and joke about how lucky I was, but sometimes my own friends warned me she might be taking advantage. "Man, she's sweet, but does she ever pay for anything?" they'd say over beers, their faces serious under the dim bar lights. I'd wave it off, insisting they just didn't understand us. "I trust her," I'd tell myself. "This is temporary. She's just getting back on her feet." I'd work extra hours, skip dinners, and juggle side gigs, all to make sure she never had to worry. And she never did. At least, not in a way that I could see. I'd come home after 12-hour shifts to her laughing in our small apartment, the scent of instant noodles in the air, her hair falling across her face as she teased me about something silly. I felt proud, genuinely proud, that I could be the guy who kept everything together, the guy who made her life a little easier. I thought I was doing the right thing, the noble thing. I had no idea that this pride, this sense of being the perfect boyfriend, was exactly what was about to be exploited. Even as I poured myself a cold beer and watched her scroll on her phone, laughing quietly at some meme I didn't get, I didn't see the cracks forming. Things started to feel off, though I couldn't put my finger on it at first. Jenna became increasingly protective of her phone, always flipping the screen down when I walked into the room, leaving it buzzing on silent. "It's nothing," she'd say with that half smile that made me want to believe her. But the pit in my stomach kept growing. Small inconsistencies started to pile up. Sudden trips she couldn't explain. Receipts that didn't make sense. Texts she'd hurriedly close when I came around. I told myself I was overreacting. I had to be overreacting, right? After all, love meant trusting, and I trusted her completely. Her tone changed too, subtly at first. If I suggested splitting dinner costs or pitching in on something small, she'd pout or give me a look that made me feel selfish for even asking. "I'm stressed. Can't you just—" She'd trail off, making me feel like I was the unreasonable one. I started to notice the way she'd casually comment about her friend's financial independence, almost like a comparison, and it stung. I worked 12, sometimes 14-hour days, sacrificing weekends just to make sure we were comfortable, and yet it felt like nothing I did was enough. Friends kept nudging me. "Bro, just check your gut, man. Something's weird." I'd nod, laugh it off. "Nah, it's fine. She's just stressed with work and life." But deep down, there was a whisper I couldn't shake. Maybe I was being used. Still, I told myself that being patient, being loyal, and giving her my all would pay off. That's love, right? You give, you sacrifice, you wait for the reward of seeing someone you care about thrive. The apartment that once felt like home started feeling tense in a quiet, creeping way. I'd walk in and catch her laughing at her phone in a way that didn't include me, and my chest tightened. I brushed it off, muttering to myself, "I'm just imagining things. She loves me." But the cracks were there, and I didn't see how wide they'd soon open. I'll never forget the night she told me. We were sitting on the threadbare couch, the dim lamp casting long shadows across the apartment, the smell of reheated takeout lingering in the air. She looked at me with those big, watery eyes and said, I think I might be pregnant. My chest stopped. My world narrowed to that one sentence. I wanted to laugh, cry, scream. I didn't even know which first. I remember my hand shaking as I reached for hers. Are you serious? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, biting her lip like she was afraid to break down. I don't know. I thought you should know. In that moment, everything else, the unpaid bills, the late-night texts, the small lies, disappeared. All I could feel was this overwhelming, urgent need to protect her, to be the man she needed. I promised her, then and there, that I'd do everything, to make sure she and our child were safe, comfortable, and loved. I started changing my schedule immediately, working extra shifts, picking up odd jobs, skipping meals, anything to save more money for doctor visits, vitamins, prenatal supplements, things I didn't even know existed until that night. I rearranged our small apartment to make room for a nursery, even though we didn't have the space, even though it felt ridiculous. Every time she winced or groaned, I felt it in my chest, like it was my body that was aching. Friends told me to confirm it, to get a test, to make sure it wasn't a mistake. Dude, just make sure she's telling the truth, they said. I waved them off. She wouldn't lie about this. I trust her. That trust became a kind of armor. I was convinced that supporting her, sacrificing for her, would be my legacy as a good man. But somewhere deep down, a tiny nagging doubt crept in whenever she looked away from me too quickly or clutched her phone a little too tightly. I just couldn't let myself dwell on it. I had to focus on love, protection, and the baby I was sure I'd soon meet. And I had no idea that this belief, this trust, was exactly what would set me up for the hardest betrayal of my life. Once the pregnancy claim hit, everything changed. Every dollar I had, every ounce of energy, suddenly felt like it had to stretch further than it ever had. Prenatal vitamins, doctor visits, ultrasound appointments I scheduled and paid for without hesitation. Everything added up faster than I could track. Jenna started making little comments, little requests that never felt like requests. Could you grab me this brand? It's safer for the baby. Maybe we should hire someone to clean the apartment. I'm too tired. Each one sounded reasonable at first, but soon the list grew longer, and my hours grew longer too. I remember one night sitting at the kitchen table, bills stacked like a mini tower of doom, typing numbers into a spreadsheet until my eyes blurred. Jenna leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and said softly, "You really don't understand how stressful this is for me." I blinked. I was doing everything I could. I had never felt so unseen, yet somehow I was still the one who had to step up. Friends noticed the shift. "Bro, she's pushing you, isn't she?" They'd ask when I tried to laugh it off. I'd nod, smile, and say, "Nah, I just want to support her. It's fine." But at night, when the apartment was quiet, and I could hear my own shallow breathing over the hum of the fridge, I started noticing the exhaustion in my bones. Every corner of the apartment seemed to remind me of all I was giving, all I was sacrificing, and yet how easily I could be replaced. Even still, I rationalized it. Love was patience. Love was sacrifice. If I gave enough, if I kept working, if I kept paying, I would create a life that mattered. I didn't see it yet, but Jenna's tiny demands were the first cracks in a foundation I thought was solid. That night, I stared at the ceiling, counting bills, and whispered to myself, "This is love. This is what love feels like, right?" I had no idea that love, in this case, would be the very thing that blinded me to the truth. I started noticing the little things, the ones that didn't make sense at first, but slowly piled up like whispers I didn't want to hear. Jenna would laugh at her phone and quickly slide it under a pillow whenever I came into the room. Sometimes I'd catch her glancing at texts I wasn't supposed to see, smiling at someone else, someone I didn't know. I wanted to confront her, to ask directly, but a part of me froze, afraid of breaking this fragile bubble I'd built in my mind. Maybe I'm overreacting, I'd tell myself. She's just stressed. I'm the one imagining things. But then the deflections started, small at first, and then more pointed. Why do you always have to question me? She'd snap when I casually asked who she'd been texting. You don't trust me at all. The words cut deeper than any slap, leaving me wondering if I really was the problem. And somehow, they always came wrapped in that charming, hurt but still lovable smile that made me question my own perception. My friends kept pressing, their voices tinged with frustration. Dude, it's not paranoia. She's playing you. I'd nod, laugh nervously, and brush it off. But inside, the pit in my stomach was growing, gnawing at me while I worked extra shifts, paid bills I could barely cover, and tried to keep everything together. I began noticing patterns, the sudden excuses for late nights, the little white lies about where she was going, and the way she subtly made me feel guilty for even suggesting we share costs. Every time I tried to pull back, to slow down, she guilted me, leaving me apologizing for my own exhaustion. And yet, I still clung to my idea of love. I told myself, this is temporary. I'm doing the right thing. I'm the good guy. I didn't see that the web was already closing around me, subtle but deliberate. The trust I'd placed in her was beginning to feel like a trap I couldn't escape, and I had no idea just how far it would go. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the glow of her phone screen in the dark, and whispered to myself, something isn't right. But I love her. I have to trust her. It hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. One evening, during what I thought was a routine checkup, the nurse handed us a small envelope. I opened it without thinking, expecting numbers, charts, maybe some early-stage confirmation. My stomach dropped when I read the words, "No pregnancy detected." My hands trembled, my heart stuttered, my mind refused to process it at first. I looked at Jenna, who was sitting there with that same nervous, biting her lip expression I thought was adorable. What does this mean?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. She fidgeted, avoided eye contact, and whispered, "It's complicated. I just thought you'd understand." My world tilted. Every extra shift, every skipped meal, every bill I'd paid, gone. Every ounce of emotional energy I had poured into this relationship felt like it had been siphoned for someone else's game. I confronted her gently at first, my voice cracking. "Jenna, why didn't you tell me? Why lie about this?" She looked down, twisting the hem of her shirt, and said softly, I don't know. I didn't want to lose you." The words were meant to manipulate, and for a terrifying second, I almost believed her. But then the weight of all the inconsistencies, all the late nights, all the tiny betrayals slammed into me at once. The apartment that had felt like a sanctuary for months now seemed suffocating, each corner a reminder of my blind devotion. I realized I had been exploited, not just for money, not just for emotional energy, but for my trust, my loyalty, my very love. Rage and heartbreak collided in my chest, leaving me gasping for air. I sank onto the couch, my hands shaking, staring at her as she tried to explain, to gaslight, to make me feel guilty for my own heartbreak. The truth was undeniable. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. And in that moment, I knew my life was about to change, in ways I couldn't even imagine. I don't think I've ever felt an emptiness like that before. The apartment, once filled with laughter and late-night jokes, now felt like a cage. Every photo, every little note, every shared memento suddenly felt like a monument to my own foolishness. I slumped on the couch, hands shaking, staring at the walls that had witnessed months of blind devotion. Jenna sat across from me, trying to explain, to soften it, to make me feel like I was overreacting. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said softly, but her voice sounded like nails scraping a chalkboard. I realized, with a gut-punch clarity, that I'd been completely played. All the money I'd poured into doctor visits, vitamins, ultrasound appointments that never existed, it wasn't just wasted, it had been weaponized. All the hours I'd sacrificed, the stress I'd swallowed, the nights I went without sleep to make sure she was comfortable, none of it mattered to her. I felt humiliated, angry, betrayed in a way I didn't know was possible. I remember standing in the bedroom, staring at our shared closet, thinking about all the things she'd taken for granted. The extra groceries, the nights I covered bills while she sat scrolling on her phone, laughing at memes I didn't understand. Every little act of love I had given was now a chain around my own neck. My friends' warnings echoed in my head like a cruel joke. "I told you, man, you're being used." The worst part, the trust I had placed in her, the very thing that made me feel like a good person, was the thing that had blinded me. For a long moment, I considered just walking away and leaving everything behind, disappearing, vanishing from the life I had built for both of us. And that's when it hit me. If I didn't act carefully, I'd lose not just my dignity, but every last bit of control over my life. I started thinking clearly for the first time in months. Every ounce of anger, every pang of betrayal, suddenly became fuel. I couldn't undo what had happened, and I certainly couldn't trust Jenna ever again, but I could take control of the one thing that mattered, my life. I began quietly arranging to sell our shared home and the van, making sure to protect my identity and my money. Every call I made, every message I sent to buyers, I did in careful, measured silence. She had no idea. I documented everything, keeping a mental and digital trail in case she tried to claim something later. It felt meticulous, almost clinical, but I knew I needed to be precise. I started transferring small amounts into a new account, securing what was mine before she could even realize what was happening. Meanwhile, Jenna's behavior didn't change. She went about her routines, still texting, still scrolling, still trying to manipulate me with those tiny, helpless gestures she'd perfected. I remember one night sitting at the kitchen table, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, mapping out the timeline. "Okay, house sells Wednesday, van Friday. I leave Saturday," I whispered to myself, voice low, steady. It was almost surreal, the calm in the middle of such chaos. I felt a strange thrill, a rush of empowerment I hadn't experienced in months. For once, the fear and exhaustion were replaced with control, and it felt intoxicating. The tension was unbearable, though. I had to appear compliant, continue the charade, while secretly orchestrating my exit. Every interaction with her became a performance, a mask to hide the storm brewing beneath. And the closer the day came, the more I realized how completely she had underestimated me. By the time I went to bed that night, a plan was solid, my mind sharp, and my heart beating with something I hadn't felt since before all this: hope. The morning of the sale, I woke up before Jenna, my stomach buzzing with adrenaline and anticipation. I double-checked everything: the house papers, the van title, the new account. All of it was ready. I moved quietly through the apartment, making sure not a single thing hinted at what was about to happen. When Jenna finally came into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and sipping her coffee, I smiled and said, "Morning. Busy day, huh?" She nodded, unsuspecting, still wrapped in her own world of manipulation. By noon, the house was sold. The van changed hands, keys and title exchanged smoothly with no drama. I packed only what I needed, leaving behind the rest as if I'd never lived there. Jenna's calls started almost immediately, panicked, pleading, demanding explanations. "Where are you? Why did you do this?" she screamed into the phone. I stayed calm, steady, ignoring the rising tide of anger in her voice. I left a single note on the counter, short and devoid of emotion. "I'm gone. Don't try to contact me." That was it. No explanations, no apologies, no chances to manipulate me further. I walked out, closed the door, and for the first time in months, breathed freely. The apartment that had been a prison of lies and exhaustion was behind me, a memory I could finally leave in the past. Driving away, the city blurred past the windshield. The scent of asphalt and exhaust replaced the stale air of manipulation and betrayal. Each mile I put between us felt like shedding the chains of months of emotional torture. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. By the time I reached the outskirts of town, the calls had stopped ringing through my phone, the texts piling up unanswered. Jenna's world was in chaos now, her panic real, her power over me gone. And I realized something, a smile creeping across my face despite the exhaustion. I had never felt this free in my life. But even as I drove into the unknown, part of me knew this wasn't over, not emotionally, not completely. Almost immediately, the calls and texts started pouring in. Non-stop, relentless. Jenna's voice rang through my phone, panicked, trembling. "Please, just answer me. We can fix this. I'll change. I promise." Every notification ping made my chest tighten for a split second, then release as I remembered the months of manipulation and lies. I didn't answer. I didn't even glance at the messages beyond a passing glance. Let her panic. Let her feel the helplessness I had endured for so long. Friends messaged me, saying they'd never seen her like this before. "Dude, she's losing it. You did it, Tar. You actually did it." And the strangest thing, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, bitter but real. For months, I had been powerless, blind, walking on eggshells, giving everything and getting nothing in return. Now, the control was mine. Every frantic text, every pleading voicemail was proof of that. I sat in my small rented apartment in a city she didn't know, sunlight slanting through the blinds, coffee in hand, and for the first time in forever, I felt calm. The fear, the exhaustion, the rage, they were all still there, but they no longer had the power to suffocate me. I could breathe, I could think, I could exist without her constant emotional strings attached to my heart. She started showing up at friends' houses, at places she knew I frequented, desperate to find me. "I'll do anything. I'll give you one chance," she begged anyone who might pass along a message. The absurdity, the audacity of her hope that I'd return, it made me laugh quietly to myself. She had no idea that my life had already moved on. And as I sipped my coffee and watched the morning light hit the walls, I realized something important. The power she once had over me was gone forever. But even knowing that, the shadow of what she'd done lingered. A reminder that trust, once broken, can never be fully restored. Weeks passed, and I slowly started to rebuild myself. I rented a small apartment in a new city, one where no one knew my name, no one could track me, and the walls didn't echo with lies. I started routines I had abandoned months ago, morning runs, cooking for myself, even reading books I'd set aside while I worked overtime, just to cover her needs. It felt strange, almost indulgent, to focus on me for once, but every moment of calm reminded me that I deserved this freedom. I thought a lot about everything that had happened, the lies, the manipulation, the relentless guilt trips. I realized that I had spent so long thinking love meant sacrifice, thinking that giving everything I had was proof of being good. But now I understood that love isn't blind obedience, and loyalty shouldn't be a leash. I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. The anger at being used, but the relief that I had finally broken free. Friends checked in constantly, amazed at the change. "You look different, lighter," one said during a coffee meetup, and I was. I felt lighter. I smiled without a second thought about whether it would be manipulated or twisted. I laughed without guilt. I existed without fear. The calls and texts from Jenna had stopped eventually, replaced by silence, and it was blissful. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. I simply didn't respond. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I realized that my value wasn't measured by how much someone else could exploit me, but by my ability to reclaim control and protect myself. Sitting by the window one morning, sunlight spilling across the floor, I whispered to myself, "I survived this. I am stronger than I ever imagined." The weight that had pressed on my chest for months was gone, replaced by clarity, empowerment, and a quiet confidence I hadn't known existed. I finally felt like I could breathe again, like I was truly free. But the final lesson was still sinking in. Trust wisely, give cautiously, and never let someone else define your worth. Months later, I got the last message from her. A desperate, tear-stained text I didn't even open fully. The subject line screamed, "Please, just one chance, I'll change." For a moment, I felt the old pang of guilt creep in, the one that had haunted me for months. But it was fleeting, smothered immediately by the memory of everything I had endured. The lies, the manipulation, the sleepless nights, the money drained, the trust shattered. I realized that she no longer had any power over me. I didn't need to respond. I didn't owe her anything. I sat in my new apartment, sunlight pouring through the blinds, the smell of fresh coffee in the air, and I felt a strange calm wash over me. The life I had been denied, the control I had lost, was finally mine. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made, and I understood now that the only thing I truly owed anyone was to protect myself, to honor my own worth. Her begging, her panic, her manipulations, they were meaningless now. I could look at the horizon, plan my future, and finally breathe without fear or anxiety clouding every thought. I had reclaimed my life, my money, my energy, and most importantly, my self-respect. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole again. I thought back to all the moments I had believed love meant blind sacrifice. I chuckled softly to myself, realizing how twisted that idea had been. Love was not losing yourself. Love was not being used. Real love, I finally understood, included respect, trust, and honesty. And when it doesn't, walking away is not defeat. It's freedom. As I set down my coffee, I smiled genuinely, thinking, I survived. I'm free. I've rebuilt myself stronger than ever. And in that moment, I knew nothing she could say or do would ever shake the life I had reclaimed. I was done running on her terms. This was my victory, quiet but absolute, and it felt perfect.